Yeah.
Okay, so we should be starting in 5 more minutes. Let's just give it 5 minutes. We have 16 people currently.
Okay.
I think we can just give it 5 more minutes. Maybe in the meantime, we can also just reshare the correct link.
Okay.
To our networks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to like where it says more details, you know, there you are able to copy your link and reshare it.
Yes.
Where did you say?
You see, you hover over your photo and then you'll see where it says more details.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where's my photo now? More details, and then
then you can share that link, you know.
Yeah.
How do you check the number of attendees? Okay, 20 people only for now.
Yeah, it keeps going up, that number, eh?
Yeah, it's gonna go up.
Huh?
Maja, how do I share the link? How do I share the link?
You have copied it.
Oh, you want me to copy it?
Yeah, you have to copy it.
Like
and
copy.
Yeah, there's where it says copy.
Oh, copy streaming info. Okay. Has been copied to the clipboard, and then I go to my WhatsApp or my email.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we all in?
I should think so.
Neltah, you're just talking. Your mic is on mute, eh? We can just see your.
My mouth moving. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I was just saying we're left with 2 minutes before we start. Right now, we can go over the housekeeping rules. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. We will be having our presenters who will be speaking on the impact of COVID-19 on the real estate investments in Botswana. And I would please like to kindly ask those who are not presenting or speaking to have the mics on mute and the videos off. So only the speakers should have the videos and the mics on. And if you have a question, please do post it on the chat function. We will then pick a few because we only have 1 hour to run the webinar, and we'll pick the best from the ones that were noted down on the chat forum. So, Mr. Maja, I should be handing over to you very soon to give the opening remarks. We have 25 people who have joined us. Maja, when you are ready, you can get started.
Okay. No, thank you, Neltah. I'm trying to present. You see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
What are you seeing?
We're seeing the flyer.
Oh, okay. No, that's good. You know, because we are testing these new technologies, so I was not sure if it's showing that flyer. You know.
And Majid, just to chip in, you're recording the webinar, right?
Yeah, it should be showing on your screen that it's recording.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. You may proceed.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Neltah, as the host of this this webinar, and I would also like to thank the panelists Rabale, Joe, Uzoma, and Chukuni for coming today, finding time to come and really share their insight into this COVID-19 situation which has befallen all of us. So it has really changed the way we are doing business and how we're going to be doing business, going forward. And as you know, real estate is a cornerstone of any economy. If Botswana is no exception. So it will be very, very interesting for us to learn from the experts who are actually practicing even right now, as COVID is still having us locked down in our homes. So I welcome you all. I hope this is very insightful and you get to enjoy this. Over to you, Neltah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for your welcome remarks. I think maybe we'd also appreciate if you can touch on how COVID has impacted real estate investment in Botswana, in your opinion. And do you see a quick recovery when it blows over?
I'm not going to say that there will be a quick recovery because, there are so many, missing pieces. So definitely it's going to be challenging because even now we really don't know when the full extent of opening is going to happen. You'll find that, a lot of retailers like right now are closing down. Some of the national retailers who, anchor most of these retail shopping malls, they're closing down. So we don't know exactly what the impact will be and how it will continue in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Remache, for your insights on that. Yes, Rebale?
No, I didn't talk. It was Shuki, I think.
Sorry, that was myself. If I could just maybe underline what Mr. Maji was saying.
Before we do that, Rechukuni, I'd just like to introduce you to all the attendees, and then you'll be free to give your opinions and also just add on to what Mr. Maji has said.
Sure.
Introducing the panels today, we have a pretty amazing panel of experts in the real estate industry in Botswana. He's a real estate professional with extensive experience in managing and developing property portfolios in diverse commercial and residential real estate segments. He is currently serving as the Chief Operating Officer of RDC Properties Limited. Next up, we have Mr. Utlwile Bale, who is the CEO of Kumo Asset Management. He was appointed in 2012, and he is responsible for driving the business and property asset management and development of the organization. Then we have Mr. Chikuni Mutiswa, who is the CEO of Litlole La Rona. He is a CFA chartered holder whose experience in investment management spans over 2 decades. Finally, we have Mr. Joe Simpson, who's the asset manager of Time Projects. He has been serving in his position since 2014 with over 20 years experience in the real estate related fields and ranges of roles and jurisdictions. Now I can hand over to you, Red Chikuni, and you can give us your opinions on what Mr. Maji has said and possibly just add on to that.
Thanks very much for that. Neltah. I think, Jed, I'll just...
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you.
I guess we have lost Mr. Chikuni. Maybe we should just proceed with the next questions, which would be posed to the panel. Do we have Mr. Bale and Simpson on?
I'm here, Neltah.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Bale and Mr. Simpson, for joining us. Now, I would like to find out how COVID has affected the development of new projects. Yes, sir.
Neltah, I think you got cut.
Rabale?
I'm here. I'm here. I can hear you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was posing a question to you and Joe Simpson.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I was asking how COVID has affected the development of new projects, and how do you anticipate development projects will be affected in relation to the property life cycle? In your line of work under Kumo and Mr. Simpson in Time Projects, I think you'd be the best to highlight how existing projects that you have been working on before the pandemic have been affected.
Okay, thank you, Neltah, and good afternoon, everyone. Fortunately for me, personally at Kumo, we is yet to do any developments this year. But with the situation as it is, one would imagine that projects would be delayed. Development projects would be delayed while COVID restrictions continue. I think if we think about developments, the reason why they are done is basically to earn revenue or make profit for the people who are behind them. So when there's a delay like this, it means the ability for the ultimate owners of those projects to earn revenue is also delayed. We know in agreements, in contracts, such as development contracts, there will always be penalties that are imposed on the parties that are in that agreement. The party that is at fault usually has to pay certain penalties or incur penalties to the one that is not at fault. However, depending on the agreements that have been signed, there could be modalities as to what the two parties do when there is a delay. And there are events that would usually cause a delay. Events that go towards delaying the performance of the one party could be events that were already anticipated, or events that no one anticipated would happen, such as in this case of the COVID-19. Usually events causing non-performance by the other party would either mean the execution of the work is too difficult to do, or one RAS, if I may use that word, or impossible. If it's too difficult to do, then the party that claim they've been prohibited or inhibited from executing the project may not have a leg to stand on. But if it's a situation where events could not be anticipated in time, then there calls for a discussion between the two parties as to how to navigate out of that situation. It could also lead to a discussion on force majeure, whether it applies or not. As I say, it's all about unforeseeability or inevitability of the consequences that are there with the delay. I think for now I'll stop there and let my panelists also contribute some.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bale. Over to you, Mr. Simpson.
Thanks, Neltah. Thanks, Bali. Hello, everybody. Yeah, Time Projects obviously is the lifeblood of the business, really. We have a number of projects that were underway when this came in. So, you know, acknowledging what Bali said there, and it's a situation we'll have to manage ourselves through. Those projects are at various different stages. We have one project which we were hoping to have tenants taking occupation during the month of May, which is offices in Setloa. And it's now obviously an impossibility, and it's just going to have to be a process of managing people in at slightly later dates. We're not allowed to complete the project as it is at the moment. there's a number of others. Most other things aren't at that advanced a stage, but obviously there's a huge cost here because we have a delay in our income and we're carrying interest for all of this period. And it's not so we can still carry on with some work on projects that haven't started. Our colleagues in the office working in the projects department continue to work with architects and various consultants to make sure that we're in a position to move as quickly as possible when we come back. But for the time being, there's really not an option but to mothball projects for the time being. I suppose the danger in this is that we're starting projects that we entered into agreements with end users on, with retailers or office occupiers or whoever, at a point in time where the landscape was rather different to what it is now. And with the delay that we're going to have, there's an unquestionable delay. We might make up some time if the Christmas construction period is not to the extent that we typically get to enjoy in this part of the world. There may be some time made up, but there's unquestionably going to be a delay. And with the different landscape that we're going to come out into, we've got to hope that the tenants that had signed up beforehand are still in shape and still in business and able to come in and occupy the space at the end of it. And the feedback we have at the moment from most of our tenants is that it's all progressing as normal, but we will have to see how that transpires in the next few months.
Thank you so much, Mr. Simpson. From what I gather from both you and Mr. Bale is COVID-19 has definitely affected all stakeholders in the real estate industry, and it definitely has built up a culture of landlords and tenants and developers having to discuss with our clients on how best to mitigate the situation and minimize risk and loss. Now, moving on to this transitional phase that we're on, what measures can be put in place that other nations have implemented in their respective countries that you feel that the local industry, along with the government, could implement to cushion or lessen the potential crash of our market here in Botswana? This will be for Uzoma and also you, Mr. Simpson, as well.
Okay, hi, Neltah. Thank you.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, I think firstly, it's very important we commend the actions taken by the government to date, which has actually kept us safer than most parts of the world by promptly acting to implement a couple of quarantine and other lockdown measures, it was a concerted effort by the entire government, which really helped. Although it has its own adverse economic effects, I think one of the good things is they are taking most decisions while listening to the healthcare professionals and keeping an eye on economic checks and balances. One of the good measures I believe has been implemented, say in the Southern African economy, is the risk adjusted strategy that allows conducting businesses in various levels by opening from levels 1 to 5, which we all heard President Cyril Ramaphosa announce the other day. That actually gave hope to most economies in the region. And if South Africa can contain the disease to a reasonable extent and basically allows businesses to operate, it gives some glimpse of hope to other economies around them, which are directly interlinked. And we find out that most of these measures are not just things they have thrown out. These are things they have thought through, and it's implemented based on different criteria, measuring things like economic impact of prolonged lockdowns, risk of transmissions in various areas of the country, ease of outbreak containment, and maybe high chances of spike in unemployment in various regions following the measures that they've taken. I mean, if we lend a hand and learn from most of those things while we're still looking at going through the extended period of the lockdown, we will be able to implement a better strategy that will help us manage. But Botswana, by default, we are more sparsely located in terms of population. And the only fear in terms of epicenter of outbreak would be Gaborone, which is a major business hub where everything is concentrated. I think learning from that, we should probably focus on the phase announced by His Excellency President Masisi, by implementing phased hand opening of the economy. And like for commercial spaces, we more or less should be looking at things like employee density management practices, disinfection measures, giving restaurants a chance to trade while employing proper strict social distancing measures as well. Else we'll find that niche of business in their street that would actually lead in spike of unemployment. Then another key thing that we must consider as a nation will be the gradual lifting of cross-border supplies of non-essential items that are classed as non-essential, because you would find out that companies like FedEx, all the courier companies, they tend to let goods that are classed as essential services go through the border, while the ones that are classed as non-essential in their own ramification are basically being slowed down. And this will equally have an impact in providing services to more or less the real estate clientele, which spans from property management, facilities, and even helping businesses trade. At least now is a time because it's basically looking at import and export of goods. Those are the things we need to carefully find out how we can relax that measure by liaising with our cross-border partners, more or less South Africa, where we get most of our consumables and daily materials. Then you would find out that most of the servicing of the real estate industries, which all the businesses will definitely need, from industrial to office to retail, once they resume, they would probably need the center managers and the services of the facilities managers as well. So basically, you would find out we would need those goods. Inventory system will move from just in time to more like just in case, which will practically have to, in some instance, increase a little bit cost of doing business because everything will be based on forecast. We will not have the luxury of ordering exactly when we want and be expecting goods to arrive within a window period of 2 to 3 weeks or 6 weeks, as the case may be. Now it's been prolonged beyond our control, which is the new normal we're going to be facing for the next, say, 3 to 4 months, if not more. We don't know at the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think we also need to look at reclassifying the real estate as an essential service. I think that's been overlooked. I think it should be given strong consideration, and RIB as an organization with REACT should probably engage the ministry, responsible ministries as well, to look into the issue, because there's no way that businesses you've classed as essential services can actually perform without the services which we provide in the real estate sector. So
right.
Transfer duty, transferring of properties and all that. We need most of the real estate professionals, we find out they're on commission basis, and these businesses, they must go on. So in a wrap up, I think once we actually look at all these factors. We will come up with a well-structured and actually strategically thought-through process between now and the next 21 days that will give the economy a breather and at least reduce the risk of unemployment that is looming everywhere, and get employees safe and happy to go back to work.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anugum. Mr. Simpson, would you like to add to that? Maybe if you can give us a more global perspective?
Yeah, I concur with Azuma there on the good handling, or what it appears to be from the statistics that we have in Botswana, the handling of the situation here. So there's some congratulations that should go to the Botswana government there. But as an immediate measure which would have an impact, we're still waiting here as property owners and generally in the economy. We haven't had a meeting yet. It's supposed to happen today of the Monetary Policy Committee, and elsewhere around the world there's been substantial cuts in interest rates, which we've yet to see any benefit from in Botswana. That being, the interest cost being a substantial, or probably the greatest cost to most property investors, that's got to be something that we need as soon as possible. I would have thought across all of the funds, anyone with borrowings is going to benefit there, and that in turn enables us to be able to take some pressure off some of our tenants. It's really a collaborative process in terms of what we can do as an industry initiative. We've all got to deal with our tenants and try and make sure they can survive. But in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to get some relief from further up the chain as well, which means the banks, and it means the Bank of Botswana being able to cut the interest rate. I may be on old news, but so far as I was aware before this meeting had started, and I know they're due to meet today, we're still waiting to get something from Bank of Botswana. So yeah, I mean, elsewhere in the world, we're aware of some initiatives that have been undertaken, as well as interest rate cuts. There have been tax holidays, and in the UK, there's been a year-long holiday on business rates, which is a cost for businesses, which is actually a substantial cost there. So that again is help coming from government. I think in other countries there has been promises by government, whether it's been introduced yet, to at least meet some fixed property costs. I know they're trying to do that, I think, in Scandinavian countries. But here it seems the attempt to try and ease the burden comes to the underlying businesses who support us. So that's coming through to the tenants, and it's the support there with guaranteed loans and support on wages, which in turn we hope then enables them to stay in business and hopefully be able to continue to pay their rent into the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Simpson. There's something that's very interesting that I think both of you did wrap up on, and it's how real estate should be considered an essential service. And I hope that that's definitely that the government will be looking into, and our lobbying bodies such as the Real Estate Institute of Botswana and Real Estate Advisory Council will be lobbying for that. Now, moving on to attracting foreign direct investment. This question is for Mr. Bale and Mr. Mutisiwa. I would like to know what your views are on how we can attract foreign direct investments at this time, and how this can benefit the local institutions and citizens of Botswana. Mr. Bale? Mr. Bale, are you there?
Yeah, I was here. I'm here, Neltah. I think
okay, so I can hear you now.
Yes, I was saying attracting foreign direct investment may be a challenge during this period of COVID-19. But while it remains a challenge, I think there's opportunity for us to call some of the monies that we may be having abroad to come and put in real estate in Botswana. For instance, the big institutional investors locally who represent most of us as citizens, I'm talking pension funds, fund managers and all, they should be looking towards fulfilling allocation to property in line with their statement of investment. For instance, if property is allocated 10% in the statement of investment and you are still lagging behind that 10%, it's an opportunity to see, okay, how do we take advantage and utilize the money that we may be having elsewhere, maybe not earning as much return as we could, and put it in property locally. It's common knowledge that there is money floating around looking for investment grade properties locally. The challenge has been finding the right properties. And most of us who are playing also in the development space have been trying quite a lot to create our own pipelines. So if we could work together with institutions that have funds to create pipelines and get the money invested here while we have these problems globally, then I think it could help. The other opportunity is working in partnership with government on infrastructure development. I think for now I will stop there and let my partner contribute.
Thank you so much. Rachikuni?
Yeah, I think Mr. Bale is absolutely correct. Even though from, I think, our perspective as a company, we more in the secondary market, we don't do development. And, when I hear him saying they certainly like more institutional investors to come through to repatriate those funds and invest locally. It's absolutely correct. I mean, it does create, from our selfish perspective, it always creates more competition for us. But certainly in that sense is absolutely correct. And yes, he's certainly right in that what I would call pure player foreign investors, them looking into Botswana at this particular point, I think that's a tall order because right now they are experiencing, I think, issues on.
Mr. Maja, can you please unmute Chikuni? Someone seems to have muted him.
Yeah, I'm off now. I don't know when.
So sorry.
Yeah.
May I kindly ask the participants not to mute anyone but themselves? Please also just turn off the videos. Only the speakers should have the videos and the mics on. Thank you. You can carry on, Mr. Chikuni.
Sorry, I was saying in terms of getting genuine outside investors to come back into to come invest in Botswana this time, it's a hard ask because I think they will be experiencing problems of their own, drawing their horns in and really focusing, getting tunnel vision and focusing on holding what they have as opposed to going out to markets. It's really about survival. But as Mr. Bale indicates, there's that huge pool of funds which the local institutions have, which they can certainly bring back home and increase, I think, that pipeline or execute that pipeline and really grow the industry. So it made it certainly, this crisis provides an opportunity to relook those asset allocation from an investment policy perspective.
Right. Thank you so much for your insights on foreign direct investment in Botswana. Still on that topic of foreign direct investment, this question is for Mr. Uzoma and Joe Simpson. Do you see investors sustaining or trying to liquidate and exit even if they're taking a hit?
From like Mr. Chikuni and Bale have explained, everyone's dealing with the peculiarity of the situation in their respective environments. And at the moment, the Botswana market, I don't see any reason to panic that might warrant investors liquidating and pulling out, even at the extent of taking a knock. If there was any reason to do that, it would have been at the onset of the increase in transfer duty taxes of that moved from 5 to 30% for non-citizen owned enterprises. And at the moment, although we did forecast a lot of movements would have happened in that direction at that time, really you'd find out the market somewhat was more like resilient to see how it would probably correct itself over time, looking at the impact of the increase in transfer duties. I think what we might witness more will be more of capital preservation, so that they can be able to survive the short-term impact of the COVID, while they sit back and understand what direction future investments would go. If not for anything, the investors planning to change their capital growth strategy from direct acquisition from the existing pool of properties, although you wouldn't find a lot of investor grade properties that are free for acquisition at the moment. Find out that a few of them, the big property companies, might have been planning on changing their strategy from growing that capability to embark on that as a mitigating factor to the transfer duty pricing scheme. That would be, from my opinion, I think that might possibly take a backseat, because it's more like diving into an environment at a period where everyone is trying to manage their risk appetite. I think they'd rather engage with already developers on ground if things normalize in the next 2 to 3 months. If we see movement in the construction industry, which I believe should start happening soon, if we want unemployment to be checked at a reasonable cost, they would probably be engaging with the existing developers to see how they can reach some mutually beneficial agreement to acquire what they have in their pipeline of projects that would probably come in line in the next, say, 24 to 18 months, depending. At this instant, everybody's just speculating. No one is going to take any harsh move. You liquidate, you go to where? Everyone's struggling. We're all facing the challenges. I don't even think we're that hard hit at the moment. We will only know the impact when the lockdown has been lifted and we start trying to go back to normalcy, which the normalcy will be the new way of doing things. That is my view.
Thank you so much for sharing your view with us. Another question that actually just came in from Sunshine Property Group was if it's possible to attract FDI with the 30% transfer duty. I know a couple of estate agents were actually quite concerned, and they had noted that they had possible investors who either cancelled that deal when the increment of the transfer duty was enacted, and they somehow feel that it might affect their businesses as estate agents. I think Joe can also just touch on that, on whether it's possible to attract the foreign investment with a 30% transfer duty and how investors are handling it currently, and whether they will liquidate or exit or still remain in the country.
Yeah, if you're going to try and attract foreign investment, putting a 30% transfer duty on foreign buyers is not a very good way of going about it. It doesn't really affect the institutional market, I don't think, in terms of pricing, because there's such liquidity here with the pension funds that the prices there are maintained. But as a general impact, then yeah, it's hugely negative, and it runs through massively into the residential market, which is, I'm sure, going to be, well, if it hasn't been already, then I can't imagine that estate agents are going to be able to make many sales whilst it's in place in or if they are, they're going to be at a 30 or 25% discount to what market values were prior to that. So, yeah, of course, the 30% is massively negative. I know it's been argued about for a long time, and there hasn't been unity, I don't think, from the members of this organisation in the past. Maybe there is now, and certainly REAC were in support of it. But it's detrimental, and as well as immediate impact, it just shows it presents a particularly negative image of Botswana. That it's not open for business. You might be able to come here and rent some space, but your staff won't get work permits, and they won't be able to buy a house when they're here and set down roots, which will encourage them to spend money within the local economy. But yeah, basically, I also think that it's a bit of a misconception that there's a great deal of FDI in the real estate market anyway. The big stuff tends to be locally owned. It is the dominant players here are 6 listed property funds on the Botswana Stock Exchange. They are the pension funds, and they're generally rich local individuals. It's not a market that's dominated by foreigners, and it's going to be hard to attract foreign investment here without 30% transfer duty, because even without that, because the returns are actually relatively low when you look at them in relation to other markets. You're coming in here and buying at 8% yields, which is good for Botswana, and you get an increment on it. But you can probably buy at that considerably better than that elsewhere, and you can probably be buying in developed economies at a better rate, albeit without the escalations that we get the benefit from here, which do improve over time. But yeah, as a market, it's going to be very hard to attract FDI, and I think it is a misconception that there is such a big foreign influence on the market, because there isn't.
Joe, just a quick question on FDI. I'll just give you a second, Rebale. Just a quick question on the FDI and transfer duty. Don't you think that it's a short-term response? Obviously, 5% to 30% is quite a huge leap, but don't you think in the long term we will get used to it, and it'll become something normal, and it wouldn't have such a negative effect as we anticipated to be in the short term?
I don't know why it's going to change over time. If you want to sell your house, be it tomorrow or be it in 10 years' time, and a foreigner still has to pay 30% property transfer duty on it, then it still has the same impact. Yeah. And it's just restricting the market and the number of people that you're able to dispose of your property to. So it's just a restrictive practice, which is going to have a negative effect on prices.
Okay, Mr. Bale?
Yeah, I note Joe's sentiments. In the short term, it may be a challenge to attraction of FDI, but I tend to think that over time, there will be some adjustment in the market on how people view the 30%, whether it's a deterrent or it's something that is there and they've not learned to live with it. The other thing that I wanted to say is, as you say, most of the players in the market are the pension funds and institutional investors locally. And my view was to see FDI being more into manufacturing, into doing things, processing things within properties that are held and owned by local institutions. We shouldn't just restrict FDI to foreigners maybe owning a brick and mortar to real estate, but them operating things in what is already owned by citizen investors. My view.
Thank you so much, Rebale. Just to move on to the next question, can I please just kindly ask those who have just joined us to mute the mics and also turn off the videos? And to the speakers, our attendees would like us to increase the meeting by 30 minutes. Please confirm if this is okay. We have a lot of questions.
That's fine with me.
Perfect. Rechukuni, is it fine by you?
All good.
Uzoma?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Finally, then we can just get started. We can just pick up from where we left off. Now let's move on to local investors. We've been talking a lot about foreign investors, but now let's look at our local investors here in Botswana, both citizens and non-citizens living in Botswana rather. What advice would you give to the local investors, potential local investors looking to invest in real estate in Botswana during the pandemic and the recently enacted Transfer Duty Amendment Act? This question is for Mr. Bale, Mr. Shikuni, and Joe Simpson. Maybe you can start with Bale. Yes, sir, in that order.
Okay. What advice can we give? I think as real estate professionals, our role is to study the market, sniff opportunities that are there, analyze them and see what is profitable and advise the investors accordingly. As to in what sectors to invest, how to invest, and when to invest in those. The other thing also is that we have other entities, government entities like the BITC, that should be supported in their role to aiding investment into Botswana by providing these facilities, the brick and mortar facilities that people need to invest in. They need to be supported so that they bring even serious businesses that would have a downstream benefit. But in terms of advice, is for us to assess the market, analyze and see where opportunities are, and give it to the investors accordingly.
Thank you, Rebale. Mr. Shikuni?
Yeah, I think I would I'll start off with the macro in terms of any advice I'm giving to an investor, a local investor. And by the macro viewpoint, I'm saying you look at Botswana both as a country and as an economy. Has the pandemic changed those characteristics? When I look at this country, what I see is stable politics driven by a lot of consensus, right? Predictable policies and very prudent financial fiscal management. So very positive, I think, on the macro. Then I'll go down to a sector view. Look at the retail industry. Yes, it's currently suffering, but Botswana have, if you look versus the other countries in the region or in sub-Saharan Africa, they have a relatively high GDP per capita. There's a lot of spending power in there. You know, during the course of early this year and sometime last year, we spent a lot of time in countries around the region as LLR, looking at potential investment opportunities. And we met a couple of developers and guys who run malls in our neighboring countries. And then we brought them over here because they were saying, you know, we'd like to consider opportunities. And we spent, I think with one of them, we took a road trip. Arrived in Maun and then drove through the various towns. Shakane, went to Molepolole, came to Gabs in Francistown. And the guys, these are really established developers. They've done wonderful stuff out in Namibia. And they were saying when they go to a town like Molepolole or Shakane, saying that there is so much potential here. The amount of spending power that people have here is incredible. I mean, these are just anecdotes, but they say in what you call a village, like Molepolole, you actually see car washes, and you have those German vehicles, the Audis, the Mercs, the BMWs, and guys are driving there and they're getting those cars clean. So there's a lot of potential, and that hasn't changed. You look at tourism. Yes, it's really taken a big gut punch right now, but not 6, but 12, 24 months from now, once a vaccine is there and people are comfortable with traveling, it will come back. So certainly, I think the transfer duty issue aside, my advice is, certainly you have to consider property, real estate as part of your investment portfolio if you have the funds available. 2, all this will pass. This COVID thing will pass. It's just a matter of time. And generally, you have to buy on the sound of gunfire. If there are guys right now who are getting cold feet and they're looking to offload and go and invest, I don't know where, certainly there's certainly an opportunity to pick up assets. Ourselves as Letlole, we remain on the lookout, and this to us is an opportunity, especially with the funding available and interest cuts out there. If they haven't happened, they certainly are coming. So yeah, absolutely, we would say carry on and don't blink. Now is not the time.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Joe Simpson, I just actually had one of our attendees asking to see your face. So please switch on your video, your camera for us before you address the question.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to see it. I've been at home. But my camera's on, so I don't know why I'm not coming up. I can see people in the panel who are on the panel who aren't on the panel, if you know what I mean. So I don't know why I'm not showing, but I've had some WhatsApp saying that I'm not showing as well. But sorry, my camera's definitely on. I keep turning it off and on, and I'm not getting it. So sorry, you'll have to make do with just. I can't add an enormous amount there to what my two colleagues have already said. I totally concur with Chikuni that. To look at it positively, there is going to be opportunity that comes out of this. The turmoil always presents some opportunities. So, as an investor, I think that you should bear that in mind. But also that you should be viewing maybe that this, although we're in a great period of uncertainty now, if you're looking at buying property as a long-term hold, then the amount of time you hold it, you should be able to ride out these bumps if you're looking at property for 10 or 20 years or whatever. I don't know if there was much more I wanted to add on.
Well, maybe if I can ask this question, if you were to advise a local investor, would you suggest that they invest now during the pandemic and the current situation, or should they hold out before they purchase property?
It all depends on what they're buying and at what price they're going to be able to buy it at. I think the other bit of uncertainty will be, which is going to present a lot of investors with challenges potentially, is what position the funders are going to be in at the end of this, and what terms you're going to be able to get from the banks when looking to buy property, because there may be a perceived increase in risk from them, which will then be reflected in their pricing and in the LTV that they're prepared to offer. So it'll depend case by case, but I think that is something that buyers will have to be wary of, that they might struggle to find finance on the terms that we've been enjoying, even if there are cuts in the interest rate. And I see there has been a cut from, I saw Aaron's comment a little bit earlier on, yes, which is welcome, but not to the extent that I think many of us would have hoped that interest rate cut was going to be. So yeah, I think the important message would be it's got to be a long-term hold. There will be opportunity. There's no reason not to buy, depending on what it is. I think the institutions will still be looking to buy because they have the cash, and we might end up with a bit of a dichotomy in the market between those much. Well, I think it already exists to a degree with those larger institutional type investments as opposed to the smaller ones, which are particularly in the residential market on the individual buyer side, not on the sort of big developments which are taken by pension funds and the like. There will be a dichotomy in the pricing there. And to bear in mind that the banks might not be prepared to come at the same pricing, that their margin might no longer be prime plus one, it might be prime plus 4 or 5. We don't know at this stage. It's still a point of uncertainty.
Right. Another question just came in, which I think is related to the one that you addressed, and maybe I'll pose this to Uzoma, as he has a big residential portfolio that he's handling. Dabilo is asking, I've been asked if property prices of residentials are going to go down post-lockdown, or if there may be panic or distressed sellers. What are your thoughts on this?
Residential properties at this, I would say they are coming out stronger in the entire COVID upheaval. And we must all be careful in trying to classify the type of residential properties that we might be referring to, because it depends on location. Like everyone will tell you in real estate, it's location, location, location. Then the others will be what type of service differentiation strategies are the properties currently being offering to the public. There's no reason for residential property prices to drop, and there is absolutely no reason, if not for anything, is going to strengthen. Well, following what we all call the new normal, where you find people speculating remote working practices, where you'd find everybody wanting to retire to their homes for fear of contracting the virus by going out there in public. So I think it's going to remain as it is. What we might be envisaging would be if there is a challenge in terms of disposable income from the end users. That's where the challenge will come from. And it's not necessarily going to be affecting the price per se. It's only going to be having a short-term impact on unachievable rentals and not driving the prices low. I think it's more of a stable market at this instance.
Thank you so much, Uzoma, for that. Now we're going to navigate into a topic, a sector that people don't really take into consideration when they're looking at real estate, which is tourism. And I think tourism has probably taken the biggest hit, if not one of the biggest hit, when it comes to the pandemic in Botswana, with a lot of lodges and hotels closing down. Now, this is for Uzoma and Mr. Chikuni. Tourism has contributed approximately 12% to the GDP of Botswana as at 2019, and the hospitality sector has really taken a hit, rather, due to the COVID-19, as we have seen operations shutting down, as I have mentioned. How do you see investment in this sector being affected on an FDI and local investment level? And also, how do you foresee the recovery of the sector unfolding? Mr. Chikuni, maybe you can start first.
I think if you don't mind, can I defer to Zoma, because they have, I think, a fairly significant portfolio.
Not a problem.
Yeah, we managed to get out ahead of the train.
Thank you. That's fine, sir. Uzoma?
I think in terms of FDIs, it's going to slow down a bit following what's happening in the market. And like Joe rightfully mentioned, investments in Botswana, the prime investments, the big ones, are already more or less locally owned. And basically, what we've witnessed in the past couple of months, say in the past 24 to 18 months, is more like an influx of hospitality products, especially where you find out most of them are now being clustered within the same area. Take CBD, for instance, which is more like a no-brainer. And what I think is the government, to protect that sector, needs to enact some form of regulatory practices to avoid these companies from competitors from eating up each other and not engaging in what I would call a zero-sum game in the end, where you would find out it's more like at the benefit of the end user than at no little or no returns to the investor that makes them pull out, and it increases the unemployment gap as well. So I think that's where the regulators, the councils, and even the CBD committee should be able to advise BITC as well to see how that can be managed. In terms of the recovery trajectory, I would say more or less is dependent on getting the seed, and more or less it's equally dependent on what safety measures you'd find the airlines and border controls at immigration are able to put in place to checkmate this influx of maybe cross-border contamination, because that's where the main market is. Tourism, for instance, I'd rather class it from a recovery point of view in three different avenues, from short, medium to long term. What I would say long-term recovery would be concentrating on the domestic market. And that domestic market will be driven primarily by businesses opening up. What we'll be seeing in the next 21 to 28 days following the easing of the lockdown restrictions, which will then spiral to the next 60 to 90 days. Then we will see. That will be the first recovery trajectory we will be witnessing. That's when life will start coming back to the industry. In the medium term, I'd focus on the regional market, where you'd find out now they've lifted cross-border controls. There is now some form of movement, but that I'm not seeing it in the short term. That's something that is more likely to happen in the next, say, 4 to 6 months, if we are lucky. And it depends on how we are able to contain the spread within the regional. Then within 12 to 18 months, that's what I would probably, in my view, say this would be the long-term view, which will be now attracting the international market, which is our main source of revenue, especially when you go out to the deltas, when you get to the Kasanis and all those wildlife environments that attracts most of the international holiday makers. One thing I'm sure of is, if there's a vaccine, remember the lockdown has created some form of hunger in us as human beings to go out there and engage in any form of social activity that we are able to engage in. People, they've been really, really dying to go do something. And basically, if the economy bounces back, we get some form of vaccine to check this. And there are good measures provided by the airline companies, which are critical in this aspect. That sector will be one of the fastest recovering sectors in the entire industry at that point in time. Although it's not a short-term thing, I'm looking at it more from a long-term perspective at the moment. But one would also argue that long-term would be relative, going by the way COVID-19 things are unraveling themselves. Like this morning, you would find out they're telling you that they've tested a drug. Basically, there's a chance of 1 in 30 survival. And you would see the impact on the US stock exchange immediately to show you the response of investors to such news. And that is also giving you an idea of what's going to happen when there's some form of announcement that yes, we now have a vaccine. Yes, people can now get the shot. Yes, when you get here, you should not be scared of traveling, or the airlines make you get that vaccine and present some form of certificate of vaccination before you fly. It's the other challenge is it's going to impact on the short term on cost of flying, because airlines will be practicing strict social distancing measures. You find out some airlines already, Air France, I think even JetBlue in the United States as well, they are not booking the middle seats anymore. And these costs, they will be apportioned to the aisle and the other seats that are being sold. So basically, you'd find out they'll be flying at, say, 40 to 50% 45% capacity that they normally would. And it will definitely increase the cost of travel. But that notwithstanding, the hunger, the lockdown, the pause button that has been pressed in the economy at the moment has created in human beings the holiday makers. They would pay anything to go get that form of life again, to make them feel alive again, make them engage in social activity. And that is what we need to bring back the economy to where it is.
But Uzoma, if we're looking at tourists, those from overseas countries and outside of Botswana, don't you think a lot would be scared maybe in the near future to actually travel and enjoy holidays?
Remember what I said, I classed it in 3 options. And these are more of the long-term strategic recovery plans for that. And those ones are purely dependent on the ease of getting vaccine and ease of treatment, reduction in mortality rates. They're telling us that the latest vaccine that can be manufactured in the world, if testing goes rapidly, fastest can be within the next 18 months or thereabouts. Now they're shrinking those numbers. Some say September, some say by December. Now we really don't know. We might as well get it tomorrow morning. You can find our neighbors, Madagascar, boasting of some herbs that they say we must start drinking. We don't even know if it is working or not. And you find out, you open beaches in the United States, tomorrow morning is all completely filled up. People don't care about social distancing once they believe that there's some glimpse of hope that they can be able to survive. Look at Sweden, for instance. They've not implemented lockdown restrictions. They're busy practicing the herding community thing and keeping away the most vulnerable at home. It's not really hit them that badly, although 2,400 or thereabouts is not a small number. Imagine 2,000 deaths in Botswana. You don't even want to think about it.
Exactly.
But in the end, you'd find out they've been able to. We don't know whether their measures are working or not, but it just tells you that these things are actually possible. What we must focus on now would be, and that is what you find people doing now, would be building their immune system to be able to fight this deadly disease, so that they can be able to take some form of risk that brings back life into them. That is what we'll be seeing in the next couple of months. I don't think we would all get locked down in the short term. We will all have to go out.
Thank you so much, Uzoma. That was very insightful. I think the tourism sector in the real estate industry, like I've said, is one that we don't frequently talk about, and we appreciate your insights on that. Now, the next question we're going to pose to all of the speakers. COVID-19 has had businesses as well as their clients re-strategizing. Companies have been discussing business continuity, and clients have been getting advice from companies on assets and investments. Have negotiations, concessions been put in place for tenants in your organizations, or from what you have seen? And I would really appreciate if each of the panelists can answer this question in relation to that line of work. Uzoma, please touch on hospitality and residential. Maybe we can just give you a bit of a break and start with Joe Simpson to touch on retail and industrial.
Hi, Neltah. Yeah, I can't be too specific here. I can give you an answer. It needs to be understood by everyone that we all sit within a chain where we're all interdependent upon each other. As I mentioned earlier, we sit between financiers and investors and our tenant base as management of the prime time portfolio, which is predominantly retail and industrial. Obviously, some tenants are unaffected. They are essential businesses, and even some of them are complaining that they've taken a hit. Other tenants have been forced to close completely, as we well know. And we are dealing with all of them on a case-by-case basis. And that they have to accept to a degree that we have our costs to cover as well, and if they want to have places to operate from, then we need to be able to look after each other. At the same time, we want to make sure that we lose as few people, as few businesses as possible. So we're trying to be as accommodating as we possibly can. We also don't want to be taken advantage of, and we do have obligations that we need to meet on our side. So it needs to be a collaborative rather than an adversarial approach. And it's quite difficult to try and manage it in an amicable manner, because it comes down to substantial amounts of money. And everyone has their own agenda to try and protect. But we've managed to keep things on a friendly level with everyone that we're dealing with so far. We will have to make concessions. We don't know exactly yet where we're going to be in terms of collections for April. We'll know in another week or so. But unquestionably, there's going to be businesses under pressure who we're not going to be able to get our full rental out of. So there will be something. We will make concessions. We do need to make sure that our tenants are there at the end of it, and that they're going to be there for another decade, rather than put pressure on them and force them out for the short term.
So what would your advice be to the tenants and landlords? This is actually a question coming from Kim Becker. Is it to say that tenants and landlords should engage in discussions and see how both parties can lessen the risk and their losses?
I don't see any other way. And we have to do it for the 400 odd leases. So it becomes a huge amount of work. But without engaging and discussing it, you're not equipping yourself as best you can to deal with it. And there are a number who are fine, but there's a lot that are going to need to have their hand held, and we're going to have to make sure that they're looked after so that they can remain in business at the end of this crisis as we come out of it. And whether we're probably not going to have the V-shaped recovery that we would all hope for, but we're going to have a U or a very long U, maybe. We'll have to see. But we have to have that dialogue with the clients, with the tenants. Otherwise, you're sticking your head in the sand.
Definitely. And if we're speaking more on the retail sector, we have a question from both Deepak and Mr. Maje on what the plans for rent in shopping malls is, as well as what will be done to mitigate the current situation affecting shopping malls in Botswana.
How do you mean the current situation? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Just in terms of the pandemic?
Yes, the pandemic. If you look at the lack of foot traffic in shopping malls, them having to close their operations, what's going to be done by landlords to mitigate that situation?
Well, I can't say much more than I've already said. We're going to, we are granting some concessions. We are granting concessions, and we are dealing with tenants case by case. But it's not possible for me to tell you every deal, every offer that we're making to every tenant. And there has to be a case-by-case basis of it, because if you are a supermarket, you're still trading and fully utilizing your space. But if you are a number of other kind of retailers, you can't operate at all. And therefore we need to be more understanding on those cases. But there's not a one-size-fits-all response. We have to deal with everyone individually, respect that they have their own issues as well, and they have their own staff costs and other costs, but we also have responsibilities of people that we need to pay as well. And we need to collect at least service charges to make sure that the security remains and the cleaning is still done, etc., etc. But that we also are able to fulfill obligations that we have, and at the same time we'll do our best to try and make sure they stay in business. But we can't just give a blanket answer on that one, I'm afraid.
Right. Thanks, Joe. I think this does certainly answer the question that Fidelis and Tabiso had raised on the implications of leases and tenancies. Like you said, this will be done on a tenant-to-tenant basis, and I think our other panelists may attest to that. Now we can move on to Mr. Bale to give us his input on property and asset management, as well as the commercial sector. How is Kumo looking at maintaining relationships with tenants and clients, and the negotiations that will be going on between the two parties?
Thank you, Neltah. I think the question is in two parts: is how is Kumo dealing with business continuity, and also advising clients in terms of the tenants they have. On the tenant side, on advising the clients, what Joe is saying is absolutely true for us as well. What matters most is keeping the relationships that have been there for a long time, making sure that clients derive full value out of their property investments. So at a time where we are faced with a challenge like this, which really confuses the whole contract situation that we have between clients and tenants, it calls for talking together, agreeing on position, and moving forward, because we both understand that both the tenant and landlord have distinct obligations on their side that they must meet, and they depend on each other. So a talking of sort is highly recommended from us. In terms of the business, Kumo, most of the basis of our fees is on collection of rentals that we get from tenants. So now where we have a situation where rentals are either waived or there are concessions that are beyond our control as a business, it means even our fee income is reduced. Yet we have kept all the services that are needed, human resource and other resources that are needed to preserve the assets on behalf of the client. And in some cases, we have gone an extra mile to create capabilities away from our normal stations, working capabilities where we work at home or other different locations, just so that we continue the service to our clients. And for that also, there will be a discussion between us as a business and the clients that we serve.
Rebale, I would actually like to take this opportunity to just throw in another question that was raised by one of our participants. Let me just see if I can find it. But she was basically asking that now we're moving into a new normal of working from home and not necessarily having to occupy office space. How do you foresee that affecting the commercial market?
We're getting cut a bit, Neltah.
Yes, sir. A question from Wame. She had said that we're moving now from working from offices. We can see that we're able to work from home. How do we see that affecting the commercial markets? Because now the demand for offices might not be as high as it normally is, because we see that we can actually work from the comfort of our own homes.
Okay, personally, I don't like working from home because it's depressing.
And a bit distracting.
wonder.
Yeah, and the day seems longer, much longer when you are working from home. So you are forever strained emotionally. So, but commercially, I would use the word commercial to mean retail and offices as well. We still believe very much in feeling and touching it when we do our shopping. So in Botswana, I think we're still years away from us saying, no, just sit at home and do things online. Yes, online platforms will bring efficiencies. Being able to work from home provides us with a different perspective of doing the same thing that we are doing, which is good. But I still think we need to feel it. Also, if you look at shopping centers, they have a role that they play over and above them providing the everyday things that we need, food, clothes. They are social gathering places. You may go to a shopping center not necessarily to spend money, but to fulfill a need that you have as a human being. So on that basis, I still think that there will still be a need for commercial space, offices, shopping centers, if you like, even beyond COVID-19.
Thank you, Rebale. Moving on to Mr. Chikuni, maybe you can address our asset management acquisitions and listed companies as well as industrial sector. Rachikuni? Mr. Chikuni, are you there?
Yeah, my apologies. I was scrambling to unmute. Yeah.
Not a problem, sir.
Yeah, I think I'll start from asset management. Firstly, from the perspective of existing portfolio. I mean, the first thing really, and I think one of my colleagues touched on that. The first thing you seek to do at times like this, or generally as a property investor, is to retain your tenants. Taking a hard line and being adversarial or confrontational, it won't work. No one wins there. So that, in terms of our strategy, was number one. And the second leg was really to, as much as possible, manage our cash flows, both from the expenses. You implement hard austerity, just spend what you just need to spend, both from a business operational and the physical property perspective, and as well as make sure that you can collect whatever you can collect, you collect. So your debtors management is now more up to date, despite the fact that you're negotiating those rentals. So really to make sure that we remain cash positive in meeting all our obligations, despite the relief that we are granting. And then finally, I think someone touched on it, being you're looking to collaborate, and no one size fits all. There's no universal answer to the relief which you are granting, be it rental holiday, abatement, deferral. It's managed on a case-by-case basis, and this is really, I think, as an asset manager, this is the time when you're earning your corn. I always say property is one of the easiest investments to manage, although we never say that, because you just buy the property, you make sure you maintain it, and you collect your rentals. And finally, I think let's go on to the acquisition side. We're certainly sniffing around locally. Opportunities will pop up more so now, and we've got very supportive financiers and institutional shareholders. So certainly we will be out there in the market.
Thank you so much, Rachikumi. Uzoma, you can wrap up with the hospitality and residential sector, but I think your fellow panelists have pretty much summed it up. But if you have anything to add, please feel free to do so. Mr. Uzoma?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Uzoma? Okay, yes, we can hear you, sir.
I think they've more or less summed it up. And I've discussed most of the residential aspects when I was taking Wame's question and all that. But one thing we need to understand is one of the survival modes that we all need to consider at this instant, especially in the hospitality tourism sector, is the issue of defraying property expenses. And property expenses in line with utility payments and softening other essential services charges. Take for instance where you have most of the hospitality buildings are all large buildings with say 11 kVA supply electricity and all high supply of electricity. We should be looking at how the government can assist, not just necessarily by injecting cash, but by advocating through, say, parastatals like the BPC to temporarily suspend things like their maximum demand charges, which is practically beyond one's control. We're already being battered by the 22% increase in electricity consumption, which in most organizations or in most properties, you'd find out that will be, say, in the range of 57 to 68% of their monthly cost of running a property, considering those charges. If they can suspend that within this lockdown period, then you'd find out the consumption can easily be checked by applying other switching to a consumption conservative mode. No doubt, our service providers, we shrink some of them to some reasonable proportion that we are able to manage to mitigate that effect. Because the truth is, between now and whenever we bounce back, say it in the short, medium, or long term, those costs are going to be there. Those are essential to running the property. We need to keep it alive, and it has to be there. So those are some of the things that we need to equally start focusing on. Then, in terms of BCP plans, the new cost of running businesses, especially say in the hospitality industry, you'd find when a client is booking your room, the questions you'll be getting will be things like, have you sanitized the room? Has it been disinfected? What cases have you had? Do you have hand sanitizers by the door? Do you have face masks? Those are the type of questions you'll be having, and those things, they equally come at a cost. So I don't think the market needs to be equally responsive and understand this at some instant might affect the cost of doing business in the hospitality, and it might transcend to maybe revenue per room when during bookings, when things come back to the new normal, as we currently would rightfully say. So that's all I think I need to chip in for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Uzoma. We would have to move on to our Q&A session. We have maybe close to 20 questions, actually.
Wow.
But I'm just going to sum them up. Hopefully, we can just be a bit quick on these. I'll just allocate 30 seconds to each of the panelists. I hope you don't mind if I just ask you to answer the question at random. If that's okay, we may proceed. The first question was from Lloyd, and he's asking how property prices in residential have reacted to will react to post COVID-19, and how long this will take to feel the effect. Maybe that could be for Mr. Simpson or Uzoma for residential.
Like I mentioned before, there won't be any dramatic change in property prices on the residential aspect of residential sector. It's going to trade as normal. That's practically everyone's safe haven. That's where we go to get shelter. If there's an isolation, quarantine, whatever, that's where we all go to. That market will, I think the will be as stable. What will be the defining factor will be on a service differentiation basis. What are you willing to provide that the next man is not able to provide, that keeps me safe and healthy in the environment for me and my family? So basically, I don't think we shouldn't expect any shift in that. if not for anything, it's going to even show some reasonable appreciation.
Right. And moving on to another question by Dabilo and Akil. This is on commercial property values. Joe, kindly assist us with this one. Dabilo is asking if the industry is prepared for the impact on commercial property values. And Mr. Akil is asking whether cutting on office rentals is likely a trend to be adopted in Botswana post-COVID-19, and will it reduce the demand for commercial spaces? I think you briefly did touch on this in one of the questions previously asked.
So dealing with was the first one, are we prepared to take are we prepared for a potential repricing, basically, was what was the first question.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be a bit different for depending on who the investor is and depending how highly geared they are. We have yet to see it, and I don't envy the valuers having to do their job for everyone's year ends and how they're going to factor this in. There's going to be very little market evidence for them to base anything on. So it's, yeah, sorry. And then, yeah, so we will have to see how that materializes, but it'll be different for every investor, just depending on how highly geared they are. And then Akil's question was about office rentals, yeah?
Yes, office rentals.
I don't see a massive change. We haven't seen great growth in the office sector for some time. So I don't anticipate any major shifts one way or the other. I don't concur that we're going to suddenly all work from home. I think most of us are probably dying to get out of our houses at the moment, and we still want to maintain some human contact. But and there will be need for offices there. Over a longer period of time, as people's internet connections and stuff get better at home, that might change. But I think in the short term, we're all going to be quite keen to get back to the office.
Thanks, Joe. I know Mr. Bale is very much looking forward to getting out of the office. Mr. Bale, I'll pose this question to you. This one is from Terofato. Some tenants have been affected by the shutdown, especially small, medium enterprises. This has affected their rental and utility payments. How can commercial property owners cushion this impact, especially considering there is no intervention from government on rent issues?
Yeah, thank you, Neltah. We acknowledge that, and as we've been saying this afternoon, most of the landlords, if not all, are looking at what it is that we could do to assist their tenants on a case by case that have been affected by these COVID restrictions. I cannot be specific in this case, but what I can say is most landlords, if not all, are valuing the relationship that they have with their tenants. And I believe within those, there's a lot of scope for people to find each other in terms of offering assistance and relief during these the months that will be affected by the restrictions.
Thank you, Rebale. We have a few questions regarding transfer duty, but I think those were answered. Sunshine Property was asking if it's possible to attract foreign investment with a 30% transfer duty. And Mr. Brett was asking also to address transfer duty. I believe the speakers did address this earlier on in some of the questions that we're answering. Now we would like to move forward to interest rates and the role that banks are playing. We have a question from Shirley. Her question is, can we engage the Reserve Bank to understand that interest rates need to be cut to assist companies and loan to value pressures to put banks for property lending will need, well, This one is quite a bit difficult to comprehend, but I think what she's basically asking is, can we engage the Reserve Banks with cutting the interest rates? And another thing that Kim just highlighted is that the Bank of Botswana has cut the prime rate by 50 basis points, which is 0.5%. Aaron's Moki has further asked if Joe could react to this extension in his earlier response. And finally, Sunshine Property has also asked about countries like USA and Rwanda dropping interest rates and when this will happen in Botswana. I think the other attendees have answered this question. Maybe I can just ask Re Chikumi to discuss, or maybe make suggestions and recommendations on how we can engage the Reserve Bank and the Bank of Botswana to assist us as the real estate sector.
Yeah, I think I may go back to an earlier point which I made in terms of prudent fiscal and monetary management that Botswana is rightly known for. I think I don't know the minds of the NPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, but one would think that they did leave themselves some space for further cuts, as opposed to making one single 150 or 100 bips point cut now. So I think they wouldn't just be looking at it in terms of a perspective from the property sector. They'll look at the more broader economy. And then I'll also go back to a point which I think Joe made regarding interest rates or the bank financing. It's not only about the interest rates. One also needs to consider the LTV values which banks will be looking at, as well as your operating or your cash flows to interest rates. So it's more, I think it will be more on a case-by-case basis. Each particular bank has its particular provenance, and this is a bit removed from the central bank. So yeah, in short, I think each landlord would have to negotiate, I think, with their particular financier.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Red. We're going to address another question about essential services that we briefly talked about earlier. This question is from Bilal, and it reads, from the overall staging of businesses allowed to operate as put forward by the state of emergency, it will seem that professional services which are within the greater real estate field are not considered essential. However, the property sector, both local and government, act as a key determination in GDP and signs for economic growth. What measures do you think can be taken by us as a real estate industry and practitioners to make us essential? I think I can ask Rebale to answer that question for us.
All right, thank you, Neltah. Just this afternoon, this morning, we had a meeting at the Ministry of Lands, Sanitation and Water Services, which we belong to. And we were looking at sectors that would be allowed or be recommended to the committee that is dealing with COVID to be back on stream within the real estate. And we included valuations and property management services as part of the services that the Ministry of Lands will submit to the COVID committee. Allow them to be back after the 7th of May. Yes, it was a.
Yes, sir.
It was not desirable that all of us were not recognized. There's some interference. I don't know from who.
Attendees, kindly switch off. Kindly mute your mics, please, and please turn off your videos. Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, I was saying it was not desirable that all of us were not recognized as essential services at the beginning, but one can understand that it was the greater good because we all had to contribute towards limiting the spread, the potential spread of the virus within our shows. But now that we kind of have a situation where we can manage things, as we suggested this morning, I think some of our services if approved, we'll be back on after the 7th.
And
Thank
while
you.
we're still on the GDP issue, there's a question from Tiamo. It reads, the Minister of Finance predicted a 13% decline. This essentially predicts an extremely tough 5 years ahead. In terms of timing, do we think the act would work in the favor of the market? I think this is also in relation to the Transfer Duty Amendment Act. Rabale?
Okay, I think we have touched on the Transfer Duty Act, the amendment to 30% for non-citizens. My personal understanding is there is a bigger intention that government wanted out of increasing the transfer duty for non-citizens. At the same time, I'm a player within the market, and I know that it does affect certain segments within our market. But as I was saying, over time, the market will adjust itself to this thing. It will remain, but just like other amendments that were done before introducing levies or percentages, we will have to get used to it and adjust our pricing accordingly. That's what it is. I think there's a bigger need by government to address something with the transfer duty, and we need to respect it.
Thank you, Rabale. We only have 3 more questions to take, and then we can close our webinar. There's another question coming in from Bilal. This one I will ask. Who can I ask to answer this? Uzama, please take this question from Bilal. Landlord versus tenant versus bank security. This has been a touchy point nationally. Why is it that no exact roll-out plan and risk mitigation strategy has been made in this regard? With governments pushing for tenants not to pay, but banks not willing to let payment slide, and government utilities still being billed, the major loser is the landlord owner. How can we make this a more fair equation? As property managers, how do we protect our clients being landlord owners? Uzoma, I think you can address this as a property manager of your portfolio and how you can protect your client being the landlord. Well, you're both the landlord and the property manager, but I think you can find a way to address it.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because I wear different hats. Listen, it's a touchy subject, and it's a subject the government, I don't think they would want to seriously delve into, because you tell the tenants not to pay rent, then it means you're automatically denying income to the landlord. And the landlord's income is used to service a couple of loans, taking care of his overheads, those utilities you've mentioned, and the government will stop billing. It just has a complete ripple effect. So, like my fellow panelists had mentioned before, the only way out is engagement. And we must all have a mind shift and stop pointing the gun towards the landlords. And we must also remember that government has implemented some form of fiscal measures. I believe it's not, I think maybe it might not be that sufficient. I think it's about 2% of the GDP, which involves some of their government loan scheme guaranteed of 80%, which some small businesses are even advised to make use of to manage their cash flow challenges. And I believe what the government refers to one of their cash flow challenges would be their ability to keep their business afloat. Definitely. By paying some of the essential business costs, which the principal cost would be rentals. And we must all look at that is there out in the open for us all to explore. And we must all explore it as a business partner and not sit down with the landlord from the perspective that, listen, you must drive down the rentals or give me a complete waiver. It's a no-brainer. So right. it's a bit of both. engaging the banks, and also the market must understand when the bank tells you they're giving you a holiday, they are not waiving it, they are capitalizing it, or it's being drawn at that current instant, or they capitalize it to start whenever your repayment holiday ends. And your repayment period is equally extended. So it means you have more interest to pay in future. So in the end, like a punitive measure by offering a landlord a repayment holiday in principle, if you look at it from a clear financial perspective. Although one month is easing out the cash flow at this point that we're struggling, that we're not having most of the revenue coming as we forecasted. But what I would pure holiday would be even freezing the interest charges, which is not going to happen. The banks are not going to do that. So the landlord can only pass on what he gets from, say, the banks or the government. Let's say a crazy thought might be the government deciding that they are suspending VAT by 12%. Automatically, it means a 12% drop in all commercial billings, which you pass directly to the tenants. You don't even have to start discussing it. But those things are not happening. I mentioned maximum demand charges. These operating are going to come. Whether they are operating or not, it's still going to come because it's a cost of looking after those premises that they've leased. They still have their in there. And the security added, there should be lighting in the premises to make sure you don't have people trespassing and breaking into stores. To a reasonable extent, it needs to be clean. Those costs, they have to come. The landlord can only pass on what he gets. So there's no hard and fast rule about it. So the only way, and which remains the only way out, is for people to sit down on the same table within reason and come to form some form of logical arrangement on how to mitigate each other's action, knowing the impact on both parties, without coming with the view of the landlord is being too bullish. He has no reason not to waive rental. So we all need to move out from that.
Thank you so much, Uzoma, for your insights. We have a question from Brian, but this is more on insurance companies. I don't know if I'll just read it out for us. Are there any insurance companies in Botswana which would pay for damages caused by pandemic, for instance, losing rentals from tenants who cannot pay because their income streams have been affected by COVID or lockdown? Is there any speaker who would like to take this one on?
I think, okay, let me touch on it now. From a property management perspective, you'd find out we've all signed on all types of insurance covers. And what the company might see as their business disruption might not have covered, or might have covered, pandemic disruptions, or infectious diseases. You'd find out infectious diseases clauses within a 25 kilometers radius of the property where the tenant is doing, or the owner is transacting his business. So it's on a case by case basis what policy you're currently keeping. So it's for everybody to diligently and carefully review what clauses they have. Engage their brokers, to engage the insurance companies. If it is there, you're gonna get it. If it's not there, then there's no point trying to force a square peg in a round hole. So yeah, that's the long and short of the whole thing. Yeah.
Rebale, 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I was saying it depends on the cover that one has, but from experience, most of the insurance covers here relating to property don't really have a pandemic included in them. Maybe because we've had a long history of no pandemic as such, that the insurance company saw the need to include it. But right now, what they say is we are covering you for consequential damage of something happening and damaging your property. The pandemic is happening, it's not damaging your property, although it's denying you the opportunity to trade and generate revenue. So most of the insurance covers would not have foreseen and included this in their structure.
I see Sunshine Property actually does agree with you, Rebale. The comment is, we're told that the pandemic is a separate issue, so there will be no cover to cover any losses. We've come to the end of our question and answer sessions. I would like to give each of the panelists 30 seconds to quickly just wrap up on our webinar before I hand over to Mr. Maja to give the closing remarks. Our final question is, what will be your suggestions on new ways to conduct real estate businesses during and post COVID-19 across the different sectors? Rechukumi, I'd like for you to start first, and then we can move on to the other panelists.
I think in terms of conducting business, it's when you're valuing potential acquisitions, just stretch your sensitivity analysis, I think, a bit further. 3 or 6 months ago, if anyone had said that there will be a time when virtually all businesses are shut down, you would have called for the psychiatrist to come pick up that person. But I think now we're all wiser. So yeah, to be a lot more conservative and always consider the worst which could happen. That's it for me.
Thank you, Chikumi. Joe?
Yeah, I very much concur with what Chikumi said there. If we're looking for a positive to take out of this, I hope it's that, harking back to something that was said earlier as well, is that we try and forge a more collaborative approach to how we do things with both the tenants on one side and with our financiers on the other side, where we sit in the middle. It doesn't always need to be as adversarial as it often is in our day-to-day, which is just the natural way that you end up, the positions you take, protecting your own interests, and perhaps we all need to try and work together a little better.
Thank you, Joe.
I think that the takeout now, everyone now needs to start planning on post-COVID measures, because after lockdown, businesses start, we intend to move on with life, and basically we all need to start planning on how to make that new normal a normal practice and a reality that we all need to embrace. And we see how we can provide, especially making the workplace a safe environment and gaining employees' trust to come back to work with the mindset that nothing is going to happen. That's one of the easiest ways for us to bounce back and start getting things running as usual. So I think both landlords and tenants and other businesses must really roll up their sleeves and plan on how both can mutually work together to achieve this task. And everything we've learned during this lockdown COVID period, or whatever it is, pandemic period it's called, I urge all stakeholders to practically take note of it. Lessons learned. Let's more focus on the lessons as opposed to the negative aspect of that, so that we can improve our future practices. That will be the major takeout. And we're lucky that the government within the lockdown period has thrown out a lot of material that has sensitized the entire public. So we've got lots of awareness now. Discussions are easier to engage in, as opposed to before, when we're all in the dark, not knowing our right from our left and practically assuming things. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Uzoma. Rebale, please quickly wrap up. Rebale?
Sorry, yeah. Thank you, Neltah.
Mr.
I was saying,
Eram.
yeah, I'm here. During this COVID-19, I think we have improved our ability to respond to a new situation in terms of doing those sensitivity analysis numbers that we all the landlords have had to be given in a very short space of time. And as a manager, I look back and say, yeah, this COVID-19 has given us that opportunity to mobilize ourselves and respond in unison to giving comfort to our clients. To our retailing tenants, I think they also need to see that they need to mix, doing retail within the premises, the physical space, but also taking advantage of online platforms that we've been doing as well, using as we are working from home, ordering stuff and them getting delivered at our different homes. I think those for me are the things that I see would be lessons to take away from the COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebale. Thank you so much to all the speakers for participating in the webinar. We had a quite good turnout. Unfortunately, there was an incorrect link that was shared, but I think we can just let our fellow colleagues who are not able to log in to look out for the recording that will be shared by the REIB office in due course. Remaje, I'd like to give you 30 seconds just to give your closing remarks, and we can close the webinar.
Thank you, Neltah, and the panelists and all the participants. This was planned to be an hour session, so it's now 2 hours, and it has been very insightful, especially to hear from the experts in the real estate space. So we have a lot of takeaways, which we know that now how we'll use that type of information going forward. And we want to continue these kind of engagements and discussions, because it is the new way of doing things. Webinars are now happening all over the world, and the beauty with it is that it's an easier way of transmitting and sharing information. And I thank you, gentlemen and lady, for putting this together in such a short space of time, at the request of REIB. I'd like to also thank the REIB board for sanctioning us to undertake this. Thank you very much to all the panelists and the participants.
Thank you so much, Remaje. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Wishing you a very good afternoon and evening. Stay safe and stay home. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Neltah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye. Bye, everyone.